we basically, Gabe and I are going to be editing a book that's going to be with a Shingwak Residential School imprint. And basically the project really grew out of the gathering we had last September at Algoma and at the Shingwak Residential School Center, where there was some really powerful discussions during the symposium and during the incubation as well. And there seemed to be a lot of interest in carrying on some of those discussions in printed form, whatever form that would take. And so what we wanted to explore was the idea of collaboration, and a series of creative, critical dialogues. The collaborative models could follow almost any possible format. I mean, the simplest would be some sort of project between artists, writers, scholars, etc., that would involve an interview, that would involve some sort of interactive back and forth. It could involve both text and visual formats. And the end result would be a sort of a hybrid text somewhere between an art book and a collection of essays, dialogues, and collaborative discussions. And because the book will be done through the Shingwak Residential School Center imprint, and will be essentially something that we ourselves can collaborate on in terms of its end result and its end format. We're really encouraging you to just go with whatever innovation or strategy you're curious about. So there's lots of flexibility in what we end up, what form, I guess, the book will end up taking. So the book will contain both images and short texts, and while we're definitely not looking for any kind of formal academic papers that discuss the work of an artist, we're looking much more at what people can do together in exploring approaches to collaborative work. And Gabe has been looking at a few examples of what might be interesting to explore. In this room, of course, we have really experienced collaborators who've done really interesting work. So some of the things she's going to talk about include the work of the people in this room.
Yeah.
So, and what we really want, I guess, today is to pick your brain and to start a discussion about what collaborative work is all about, what its potentials are, and what its challenges are.
And for those of you who are already working on collaborative things or who have collaborative projects in mind, this is a great platform. Like, if you're looking for a place to disseminate your work, then this is a great platform. And also just hoping today that people will get inspired to do stuff and submit. So this is the title of my presentation. It's really not a very good title. Collaborative artists ready making collaborative works. It seemed funny when I wrote it that way one in the morning, but now it just seems kind of weird. But I used all the colors. So Good Collective is a collective of artists that works out of South Africa, and they produce a lot of different collaborative works. They run an art center out of a Shabin, which is like an illegal drinking establishment in a township. And so this is like one of the, I just chose a couple things that they've done. They've done lots of interesting work, but this is like some money that they printed in. The work is about the economy of South Africa being so linked to the colonial system, and basically it's saying you can't make this fresh start. Post-apartheid is not a fresh start. We're completely linked to our colonial past. But this one's more about debt and the economy. collaborative drawings done by John Nostetten.
No
I don't-
saying.
Do you know him?
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with his work at all, but he's from Saskatchewan, right?
yeah, it was
Yeah.
in our department.
Oh, great. And Shubhanaya Shuna, who I think is awesome, two drawers. And they worked together on a series of collaborative drawings, which some of were reproduced as banners, and one was like this 40-meter long banner that flew. And I just brought them because I like collaborative drawings, and I think they made really beautiful ones. That's a picture of the banner. Where's Shubhanaya Shuna? That's a terrible reproduction, or terrible quality image of something they did together. Terrence Willow and Adrian Simpson's, I don't know if everybody saw Sick and Tired and Paper Bag Princess. I got to see it at Grant Gallery. Collaborative work that they did about residential school, about education, I guess, in general. I was asking people for like, who should I put on my presentation? I didn't even know about Christophe Jean-Claude. So there you go. If you guys feel like undertaking a massive project, like wrapping an entire coastline for our book, you could. But this is more like, I guess, an aesthetic project. It's really beautiful though.
Is that theirs as well?
Yeah, that's theirs as well.
That's
Oh
my-
yeah, I was like, or
That's
you know,
my
something
favorite
smaller
one
scale.
that they've ever done. Is
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Claire Fontaine. Okay, Claire Fontaine is a artist collective that works out of France. And as far as I know, there's like 2 members of it, but there might be more. But they just go by Claire Fontaine, and which is the name of a brand. Oh no, I think this is Claire Fontaine. It's the name of a brand of art supplies or something, right? And they're like really a political sort of leftist art group, and they do lots of text-based work. They do everything collaboratively, and they produce texts as well, collaboratively. I really love their work. So this is like this font that they say they invented using neon bulbs because they're really cheap. They can write different things. So they work in neon video, sculpture, painting, and text. They're interested in the crisis of singularity, so that's part of their collaborative method, and also like around the notions of the death of authorship, which is sort of is behind their interest in experimenting with collective protocols of production. Yeah, and they're really into quotes and just in general challenging ideas of individual authorship.
Yeah.
This is the work they did. Oh yeah.
It's 2 people, but they kind of present themselves as one woman, is it?
It might be more than 2 people. I actually don't know how. I don't know if it says anywhere how many people are in Claire Fontaine, but I've seen them present, and there was 2 people there, and they call Claire Fontaine she. Yeah.
Got it.
They use a feminine pronoun. This is a work they did where they made a map of, I believe this one, is it the U.S.? This one might be the U.S. now.
Seems too.
I know that the original
Looks like
ones were.
France.
Yeah, it looks like France.
It might be France because originally it was like all the countries that were undergoing severe economic crisis and restructuring in 2009, and they did these images of the country in matchsticks, and then for their performance they light them on fire. They don't actually light them on fire. They have somebody from the gallery light them on fire, and they create just these beautiful images. They also do
Love
text
it.
work with matches.
It's amazing it doesn't burn down the whole gallery.
They have to have firemen on hand to put it out. It's like this big deal, and they just completely destroy spaces too. But yeah, so this work is sort of about the economic crisis in Europe. This is a quote from a collaborative text that they wrote, which I don't think I'm going to read out because it's just too much, but I do encourage you to look up their collaborative texts. This one's from something called The Human Strike. So it's like, and I And then my last example is Sherry Boyle and Emily Duke, who did a collaborative process where Sherry Boyle sent her drawings, I think even via email, to Emily Duke, and Emily Duke sent her poems to Sherry Boyle. And it was like a very loose sort of type of collaboration where they just sort of were inspired by the image, so they didn't take the image as a directive or the words as a directive, but they worked more sort of loosely and sent these things back and forth actually for over 8 years. And then they made this series of works together. This one is called Until That Day We Embrace Disease and Remember the Origin of Joy, which I guess would be the words of Emily Duke, and then Sherry would draw the images. And when they presented them, it was kind of like this, like the poems on one side. I think this one's called Soldiers Are Not Afraid of Blood. And it's like a poem by Emily Duke and drawings by Sherry Boyle. And this one's called I Want to Be Afraid of Nature. They're just really beautiful, and like they're just like another method of collaboration, which is more like working on your own but being inspired by the other person. And yeah, that's everything.
Yeah, so I think we are interested, especially in working at the interface of text and image, although it doesn't have to be text and image, but that is something that I think might emerge as a theme in this exploration of collaboration. And yeah, there are people here who have done a lot of work on collaboration, and I guess Leah and Jamie's piece that's been going now for what, like 2 years?
Since 2010.
Oh wow, yes, 3 years, where there's been quite a lot of writing, sewing, and I guess photography, video, and the material object that explores different forms of collaboration and different ways of different formats, different ways of speaking, I suppose, different ways of writing. So I guess we would love to hear from people in the room if they have any thoughts about collaborative process and what that might mean, and what collaborative projects they've been involved in.
Or if they're interested in working on collaborative projects. I'd like to hear about those too. I know we can read about some.
I just want to say I would love to make drawings for it, but I don't know where to start with reconciliation because it's such a huge thing, and it's sort of it's part of my world, but not directly. So I don't really know where to start because it's not something that has directly affected my life. So if I was working with a writer, then I'd sort of be following their lead.
Yeah, well, that's certainly a huge topic that you know, the word reconciliation has been certainly criticized, and we don't even know if it will end up being part of the title and the concept of the piece. It has a working. It is in a sort of a working title at the moment, but really, and it certainly is a space where you can explore, I guess, the limits and the problems and the challenges of this word, which always seems to evoke this notion of a goal or something to somehow achieve, or which has been something that, especially at Algoma, that notion was really challenged, and other concepts and words were explored in tension with that word reconciliation, such as decolonization or conciliation, or even getting away from those nouns, which suggests so much an endpoint. But it certainly is a space where those issues can be brought up critically and
making art about that and to yeah, so it's like kind of a strange thing to imagine making art about it. One of the things is that I think that will change over the month. You know, as we have these discussions, the more ideas will come. And then another thing is working in collaboration. That's a conversation that can develop much easier, it seems like, when you're working with more people than just on your own. And the sort of responses you could have could be about the practice and theory of reconciliation and critique of it, in any way that you want. But it could also be, you could also be thinking more about, when I think about reconciliation to me is not like something I'm super interested in, but what I do like to think about, I guess, is like building relationships in the context of colonization, in the midst of colonization. How do we build relationships with each other, not just settler and indigenous, but also between settlers? Because how does this process of colonization destroy our relationships with each other, right? And then, so when I think about art projects that could be a part of this work, I think about art projects that practice building relationships. You could think of it in terms of that, you know, instead of needing to respond to the discourse of reconciliation, you could be doing projects that practice building, like what does it mean to build a relationship in the context of the colonial project, right? That's what I was thinking about that.
Keep in mind how difficult that word reconciliation is. You'd be open to working with projects that are hard to translate, so maybe may not easily translatable, so maybe works are presented in different languages. So it would be text, sure, but it's not necessarily in English.
I would think
And so would you need a translation of it? Yes, or would you just let it remain untranslated because it's a difficult topic?
What do you think? I mean, I guess perhaps it would be interesting to create some sort of critical space within that that, in a sense, that absolute difference of another language that probably not many readers would be able to understand. Is there a way of including within that project some sort of partial translation device that maybe doesn't offer the translation but brings to the fore what's involved in trying to bridge language divides, or that draws attention to, I guess, the limits of our own languages or our own codes of intelligibility, so that not everything is accessible to. Would that be a possible thing to think about even through the collaborative process?
Mm-hmm.
I guess the limits and the partiality of translation.
I imagine it would be nice to just remain that difficult space
Yeah.
where it's not translated. And just to make up something, say you have two collaborators, and they have a dialogue in two different languages. And really like that, because say like what Anna just said, having a distance from reconciliation, that word is something that many of us have, and we see this word reconciliation, and we know it's heavy, we know it's difficult, and we don't know what to do with it. So maybe we talk about it privately, and we don't, right? So that it's hard to judge, I guess, if you don't even know what it's saying. But that's precisely where many of us find ourselves.
I mean, I think that sounds like a really great idea to have, you know, the two texts side by side that may or may not be speaking to each other, or the overlaps are unknown perhaps to the reader.
So maybe one person, I really might think, oh, I know this language, they'll read one side of it, but still not know what the other side says.
Yeah.
Right?
I like the idea of, I like to think about what it means not to translate, and what it speaks about when you're faced with the other, when you're faced with looking at a text, because we're not often faced with looking, well, you know, depending on what you read, but with a text that is seemingly unintelligible. But there's also something about text and the cadence of the text, and if you were to read that text and hear the sounds of that text that speak without having to translate into perhaps a common meaning. But I really like the idea of, I presented at a Jungian conference, and I started out the conference, it was about the other. And I started out the conference by speaking in Anishinaabe Mawin. And I didn't translate it. And then I started, and I think that I gave them an understanding of what it means to be the other. Because if I had translated it, then the impact of it, the understanding that I wanted to convey, would not have been conveyed. So this idea of not translating is a beautiful one, and maybe one can perhaps point to things in the text so that it might eliminate some frustration from the reader, but it's not a translation. It's not a translation of the text. It's just perhaps a doorway to the conversation.
So when you switched to English, did you kind of preface it by saying, I did that because, or you just kind of kept going?
I absolutely said, because I made the point of saying, this is an illustration of, an
Right.
example of, and everybody got it immediately. And it reminds me of that, the story that, I'm trying to think of his name, he was a former U of T prof who sometime in the 70s was, and I'm not sure what West Coast nation he was negotiating for, but there was a land claim. And the discussion, there was no commonality in that the elders were saying, well, how can you consider this your land? And the government, and this was a prof that was representing the government at some point, they were trying to communicate to one another, and nobody was understanding anything until an elder said, if this is your land, where are your stories? And then he proceeded to speak for 2 hours in his language, and most people there didn't understand it, but they understood. That if this man could speak for 2 hours and tell his stories, none of the government reps could tell stories about this land, and they understood.
It's from it's in Jay Chamberlain's book.
It is the book.
Yeah.
This is your land. It's the title of his book.
Yeah.
So it's Professor Chamberlain. Yeah.
Yeah, he begins his book, chapter 1.
Eileen, you were talking about the project that you're involved in here, and I thought that concept of the shadow was something that was really a fascinating one. And in light of this discussion of, I guess, the translation and to translate or not to translate, I suppose, the concept of the shadow is also a really interesting one to think about in terms of collaborative work.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I have shows and stuff on me, and it's wearing out, and sometimes people will listen to the side. Look, it dawns on me that she can touch, like she can actually physically touch people meters away, and at some point I'm just kind of like the moving form that enables this type of touch, right? And sorry, I get overwhelmed when I think about this project. But I think it then changes the relationship of what we think we do as an individual. Because when I'm really, really tired, when my body's really tired, the vibration, I experience the vibration before the sound. And I think, oh, that's another form of shadow. It's a shadow that can interpenetrate. And I wonder how her voice is going to change my internal organs because it's so close and you can feel it moving. And so then you think, okay, well, where is the line then between the individual intention to do something, anything, and then this amalgam of two different people, I don't know, spaces that somehow mix together. And so when people, and it's interesting because when I'm really tired, I feel really vulnerable running down the street. I feel afraid just because my body's tired. And then I think, oh, it's okay because Cheryl's surrounding me like this, and it's very, very comforting. And so then, but then I also feel anxious for some reason when that I'll get picked on when she sings her song Gigina, which means home in Cree, because I think, oh, people are going to make fun of me because I don't look native, and I'm playing this song, and it's irrational. And then I think, oh, how much of our bodies or how much of our movements determine what we consider to be rational thought, right? So when your body's exhausted, but you think you have to focus on an idea, how much are we a part of that tiredness that then determines how we think? And so if we think about that in terms of politics, like what kind of overdeterminations have we made, or what kind of rationalizations have we made, because we're so tired of a particular political concept. And so I think the shadow keeps moving from not physical space, but it moves from one kind of political space into another one. And then there's always the possibility that harm can be done. So I think about that a lot when I'm running. But when I'm running, when I get up to go running, I think, oh, this is my time with Cheryl. And Cheryl doesn't know that I'm spending all this time with her, which is like a trip and a half, right? But it's significant. Yeah. But I was wanting to ask about, Peter had asked me to assist you in the performance in Montreal. And I was thinking about this project that you're suggesting to us, and it's such a struggle to know what that was, what that performance was, and then it becomes a struggle to try to articulate it in a different way, to conceptualize it. And so I presented a paper at Congress, at a conference of trying to think about what the hell was that thing, right? But then I was wondering, in terms of documentation, how would you guys consider that kind of conveyance of performance or a performative collaboration in a written or pictorial form? Like, I don't know, I think it's a very hard transformation, like translation, right? It's translation of forms. So.
Yeah, that's actually, I was just thinking that, like, what is, because I think you're also requesting or thinking about designing a new type of publication, which is reflexive of what collaboration is, right?
That would be great.
Yeah, because, and thinking about languages, why question even, like, why do we even need to create a space for translation? Like, if it's a new kind of space, which is designed, the physical presence of the book, right, is one thing, but how it unfolds itself in as a book can then also be, then. Then there's also an opportunity, because we need to figure out a way to represent collaboration, which is not trying to fit inside of a regular container. I think that's part of the issue, right? Because you fold this and you fold over these pages, and then textual and image, going together. Well, I mean, that's also very structurally very familiar, but also structurally very limiting. And the idea of collaboration is that, or one of the shapes of collaboration is there are no limits, right? It's what you bring to, it's what you bring to the space, or it's what you bring to the collaboration, right? I think that's probably what I learned from our work together. Because we were there together, there was no limits. And I went to, personally, I went to a place in performance which I'd never been to, because we were there together, working together, right? So, I guess a curious question for me is, how are you going to, like, allow for that kind of new page to be designed? Yeah.
I don't know whether that would be ultimately something we would determine. I think that, wouldn't that be the challenge of the collaborators to figure out if they wanted to think about in a new way a previous collaborative performance, what form would that take on the page? Of course, it would be completely transformed to a two-dimensional piece of paper. I mean, what would be awesome is if we could do.
Yeah.
No, what I was going to say is have an exhibition and then have a book and
Yeah.
I mean, there's all sorts of ways of carrying on these dialogues that we've been having over the past couple of years, or centuries. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, but at the same time, I guess that's the challenge that the collaborators would have to think about. You know, to what extent would this performance, what would be lost in the transfer to page, but also what other possibilities could occur or develop on a two-dimensional surface that was not possible in the embodied, never to be repeated moment of performance. So
I was going to say the same thing, that like a book is a limited format for sure, like a paper, two-dimensional page is a limited format, but you know, I love a book at the same time, right? So it offers things and it takes away things, and it's definitely just one platform for these ideas. But I'm serious about the flip book idea.
Yeah.
I'm serious about that. That could be, you know, like you could have a small corner on the top of each page with an image on it, and you can flip through it, or like there's lots of different ways that you could, where you could see moving image, or you know, there's lots of different ideas, and it would be super exciting to
Explore that.
yeah, I mean, we did talk about, okay, who are we going to approach to have this published, and we ultimately decided not to go that route, that we want to essentially self-publish, because, you know, if we go with University Press and peer review, you know, all sorts of structures immediately come into play. And then if we did speak briefly to another publisher, Arsenal Pulp, and you know, it has to fit with their commercial viability, I suppose. And so, in a way, this project can move in different directions, because we do have some funds to make this thing happen, and there will be honoraria for contributors as well. And so, I think it's really exciting, you know, as someone who works within those academic structures, and you know, every little step of the publishing process in the academic world comes with its little boxes. You know, I'm not saying that this will be a completely open space, but it will it will have its own limitations. But at the same time, I think we can do it. We can really do it in ways which are more self-directed than other publishing venues or other exhibition spaces. So
I think of other kinds of technologies that are available now, and I had my students design a book at Emily Carr, and one of them was going to be majoring in sound, and so they put little I don't remember what they're called.
Yeah,
QR codes,
Yeah.
QR code.
Yeah, and so that you could you could then just, and then you got a song, or you got a few sentences back and forth, or bits of conversations. The other thing is we did a project on sound, and then the absence of sound. And so looking at silence and how you can talk about those silences that happen between us, and also how you can make room for silence and or thinking in the graphic design of the page.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know there's a lot that can be done to disrupt the linear form of the book within all those kinds of.
I mean, sometimes when you think about what it means to go through a book, and you think about conversations being back and forth, well, maybe the conversations happen between a collaborative, let's say a couple, between the beginning and the end of the book. So you actually have to go there. You actually have to travel to, through this object to get to the other side. Things like that.
A little bit about silence and understanding I'm remembering your performance with Adrian Stimson, which is on YouTube, and it's hard to get a sense of what's going on. But it's a video that can be watched in silence to get a sense of what it is. And still that inability to get it is very, very, very powerful. So that also speaks to the interest, relatability piece. At the same time, it says that silence, which is what we do when we engage in the book, is a very powerful space to be in. When it's silent, where you don't get something. You can also hear it or not hear it.
It sounds like the direction that people seem to take this is outside the realm of the formal book, certainly outside of the notion of publication, into more of a book work. And what seems interesting about that, and Dave was talking to me earlier about well-informed artist collaborations, and it didn't strike me until we talked now about artist books and how they're inevitably a form of collaboration of some kind. I curated a show many years ago at Walter Phillips, and wrote 200 books from the Amazon collection. It was quite exciting. I realized that so much of the work was pushing off of ideas of people working together, or off each other. Some were actually the works that were very singular seemed not to be as interesting, and so that may be a direction. It's much more labor intensive, much more costly, but maybe what we're looking at is radically alternative methods. So we're not looking at a publication by 500, but something smaller, discreet, beautiful, intellectually challenging. Particularly, someone Stevens' work with Curtis. If you had an image printed, you'd have to wear 3D glasses to see it, right? So it involves a collaborative process with the reader as well, right? The sound or the QR codes, all these different things. So it's has great potential. I think it's taking it in a different direction, which is a wonderful thing.
So you're thinking that you were saying perhaps a more costly book, but almost more a chapbook form, in the sense that it exists as almost a unique entity, not each book, but it's much more a chapbook. Is that what you mean?
I'm thinking more of book work, like the notion of an artist's book, or different interpretations of it, but the book itself becomes the object of art.
Oh, yeah.
And not certainly outside the realm of like catalog of some work, but really being just representation of what Dave was saying with the flip book. At West Coast Line, for instance, we've done that before. We have the corners, and it's really a beautiful aesthetic moment, right? And other journals have done that too. That's very possible to do something like this. So then you have a sense of collaboration when one artist or one group of artists who are doing the flip side are weaving themselves into one of the pieces, right? So things like that have potential to depends on that kind of. I don't always like the terms artist books, book works, right? There's something about them that compels.
I've never heard the term bookworks.
Bookwork.
But yeah, that is something also to consider, that to expand upon the collaborative process, that the contributors could potentially see each other's contributions, and so there might be another layer of response or interactivity between the pieces, rather than have some sort of editor commenting on potential links or whatever. There could be another sort of round of the collaborative process where the contributors respond in whatever way to one another's pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that could then bring in the editing process to the collaborative work, or into collaboration.
It kind of shifts your role
Yes.
more into a curatorial.
Oh, right, yeah. Mm-hmm. Or almost just sort of a coordinator of just enabling these conversations to take
Mhm.
place and to be multiple and to go in multiple directions rather than just, let's say two people working together, then their thing comes in, and another two people work together and their work comes in.
I can think of a lot of examples that sort of come close to what Ashok was talking about with the book becoming more of a sculptural object. Lots of examples, so I can't go into them all, but there's the Griffin and Sabine series by Nick Bantock. You know?
Yes.
Okay, so it seems like it would work well because of the unpacking kind of thing, or the things that are sort of hidden. So you have these little envelopes with these cards that you have to kind of look at, and they feel like an object that somebody actually mailed to another person on the other side of the planet. At least that's what you're being told to believe. And then there's Raw, which was a journal of graphic novels, like avant-garde graphic novels by Art Spiegelman and Francois Moody, where each copy of the magazine they would alter by drawing or ripping out pages or putting copy stains on them. And they drove their editor completely nuts. So, but it was important for every single issue, every copy of every issue to be somehow unique. There's, this is getting, some of the ideas may not be doable, but it's kind of interesting that they have been done. I can think of a couple of examples where people have had vinyl records printed on this very, very flexible plastic. So like you have like a page that you can actually rip out and play as a record.
Yeah, I think I love that idea of having to interact with the book in a different way, like for example an envelope, and that financially whether that would be viable or not. But I do think that QRs do open up another world, right? And they do open up another medium and another way of speaking, I guess. So that there's lots of it's a really great suggestion.
Steve, you use QR codes in your mapping thing.
Not on my map.
Oh, what
One
was
of my
that a
students
student?
used QR codes. It's actually it's pretty simple to use, and one of my students did a project which was kind of like a interventionist project where he went around and he made up these QR stickers and put them on public art monuments, and then when you scan them, it takes you to a website where it kind of has this dialogue about the politics of public art and public spaces and stuff like that. And each site had a different history attached to it, sort of thing. But you can do QR codes for just about anything. Yeah, I think Douglas Copeland did a painting series on QR codes.
Oh.
They're paintings. You can scan them as well, and they say different things. We should go.
What would you like to do with the book? And who's going to be reading it? And I'm
going to be, I mean, we'll definitely have a party and a book, you know, sort of event, but, whether it'll be exactly what and where and how many events, I have absolutely no idea. I mean, it would be great if the thing really, got going distribution wise, but I mean, it is, because, you know, because we're not going with, a publisher that has distribution, you know, it would be